So I started writing when I was 8 years old, and I still remember very clearly that my first poem was about a donut. A donut, literally a donut. And I was sitting in my class, and we were in ICSE medium school back then, and those classes are like huge, 40 students per class. And I was sitting there, and I was an introvert, a very, very shy girl, so I didn't have many friends. In fact, I didn't have any friends at all. So I was sitting there, and I was wondering what to do, and I was getting really, very bored. And I had a book in front of me, and one pen. And I thought, okay, let me draw something. I mean, I can draw something, right? So I thought about the one thing I really liked. That was donuts. And so I drew a donut, except that the donut did not look like a donut. It looked like a sun with sprinkles, which weren't even like sprinkles. So it was a really bad representation of a donut. And there was this girl sitting next to me, a girl I didn't talk to, and she looked into my book, and she started laughing a lot. And then there was a girl behind me who also looked into what she was laughing at, and even she started laughing. And I felt really humiliated. So I thought, okay, let me just do something else. They're laughing at me drawing, let me just write something maybe. So I was just doodling, and then I thought, okay, let's write something. And I still remember that I titled the poem The Main Thing. It was called The Main Thing, and it was about a donut. So I went home that day, really proud of myself of having done something new. And I told my parents, hey, you guys, I've done something really, really, really cool. You want to hear? And they were really bored that day. So they were like, okay, sure, go ahead. They thought I was fooling around. So I recited my poem to them, and they started laughing. And when I say laughing, they were laughing, and there were tears coming out of their eyes. They were laughing that much. And I thought that this is so bad, so why are they laughing? Well, a few years later, they told me that my poem actually had a lot of double meaning connotations, which, trust me, an 8-year-old, I had no idea about that. And I just thought they were laughing at me because my work was hilarious and it wasn't good enough. And that really let me down because I thought that I had done something that I was proud of. Yet why were they laughing at me? So I thought, okay, so what? They laughed at me, doesn't mean everybody else will. I'm going to keep working on this. So I started writing, and it was about the most mundane things. For example, if I saw like a pink chair which I really liked, I would write a poem on that. So for example, a pink chair. Oh, guess what? The chair is pink and does not sink. Have you seen the sink? That was like how my work was. It was a lot like a nursery rhyme. And it was hilarious. Like now if I read my work, what I did back then, I would laugh at myself. But you have to start somewhere. But at the same time, even after I wrote something, I didn't feel comfortable with sharing it with anybody. Because I thought I was already a social reject. If I talked to my friends about something like this, one or two friends which I did have, they would laugh at me even more. And that let me down, but I still wrote. And from time to time, I would tell my mom about what I wrote, and she would, give me a smile and say, you did better today. Try again tomorrow. So whenever I would get time or whenever I found something that interested me, I would write. For example, the moon is round, oh so sound. Yeah, that's how my work went. So that's how I actually started. And it went on for a few years, back and forth. And then I shifted to Oberoi, which was a new school for me. And when I came in here, I was still the same introvert that I was in my previous school, except that the classes were much smaller and I felt even more out of place. Now when I felt out of place and the fact that I left everything behind from my previous home, I felt like I didn't belong. And I didn't know what to do with myself because I felt so completely alone at that point of time. And during all of that mayhem, I forgot about my writing. So I stopped being true to myself of who I was. And I just stopped writing. At the same time, I lost the pride that I had for myself. So basically, I was half a person of what I really should have been. And that went on for like a year. And for a year, I just gave up on everything that I had. So I was even more closed off than I used to be. I shut myself off in a shell and kept to myself all the time. So a year later, and this was around 9th grade mid, one of my friends came up to me. She was a pretty close friend of mine. And she told me to read this book called Tiger's Curse by Colleen Hook. And I was not a big reader. Trust me, I used to write, but I never read anything. Books were disgusting to me. So I detested them. I detested reading completely. And she gave me this book, and I told her that, I don't read, so why would I read this? She said, give it a chance. You might actually like it. And I didn't have anything better to do, and it was vacation time as well. So I thought, okay, let me read it. And so I read this book and I started reading it. And I finished 100 pages in a day. The most I had ever done in my whole lifetime, believe me. And I read it, and for some reason, I really connected with all the characters they were, especially the protagonist. And I had this overwhelming emotion in me. What the girl felt in the book, I felt it. And I wanted to write about it. I just wanted to put it down somewhere. So I thought about a diary note. But when I started writing, it was basically thoughts flowing on a page. But it was so much different than just a diary note. It was like a poem. And that was the first time I actually got back to writing. And this time it was different. It wasn't about mundane things like a chair, a pink chair, or a moon, or the sun, or flowers, or a duck. But this time it was about emotions, strong emotions, which I felt, and which the characters in the book felt. So within the next 1 week, I ordered the entire series and I read it. Again, the fastest I'd ever read anything. Even my textbook, for example, I never read anything that fast. And it was surprising even to me that I was doing something so different. I was becoming this different person. And that time I felt that maybe I was, drifting further away from who I really was. That by the end of, the vacation, I would just be somebody totally different. Somebody I didn't really want to be. But then I thought that by putting my thoughts on the page, I'm being more true to myself than I ever was before. So I kept writing, about stuff that basically got to me. So if I saw a dog the other day which was, whimpering in pain, I would write about that. And so my work became to be, more about emotions. And so I shared some of this work again with my mother, who was basically like a guidance counselor for me. And she said, wow, Nishka, this is so much different to what you wrote around 10 years back. You should feel proud of yourself. And I looked at her and I went that, really? Me? Proud of this? And she said, you should be. You've done something so different. And so I went back to school and, the friend who introduced this to me, I went and talked to her about it. And to, the 1 or 2 other friends that I did have. And they read my work and they said that this is actually really good. And then I thought that, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe I should just keep continuing to write. And what happened was that every time I wrote, I felt like this huge weight was being lifted off my chest. So, all those emotions that I kept bottled up when I shifted to a new school and everything that I faced, it all started to ease off. And that helped me open up to some extent because now I didn't have something that was weighing me down. I was actually being able to push myself up. I was growing lighter. So that helped. So writing helped me in that way. So that's when I really got back to writing. And then I would write about, what people told me, what I felt. And I just kept writing. And then my dad came up to me one day and he said that, you write a lot. Maybe you should, publish a book or something. And I looked at him and I started laughing. I was like, I don't even share my work with most of the people around me. People would just look at me and start laughing. I mean, who writes? And he said that, why do you care about what other people think? And I said that, I don't have many friends anyways. I don't want to lose, whatever little reputation I do have. And he said, well, you shouldn't care about that. And I told him, no way, I'm not writing a book. So he gave up that for some time. But then my friends kept telling me, that you should share some of your work with the world. So I made a blog and I put the blog up. And I actually had quite a few hits on the blog. But my dad came up to me another week later and he told me, why do you have a blog up? So I said that you said to, put my work out there. And he said, not like this. What if somebody takes your work off the internet? It wouldn't be your work anymore. And at that time I felt such fear because, somebody would take my work and I couldn't imagine people doing that. I was just so innocent. I didn't think that the world was filled with negative people or anything like that. And he said, Nishka, you have to be smart with something like this. If you have a talent, don't just put it out there. Do it the right way. So he told me again, think about publishing a book. And I still dismissed the idea completely. But at the same time, I kept sharing my work with a few more people, Slowly from just sharing it with best friends, I started sharing it with close friends. And they all told me that I should really pursue this. This is something I'm good at. This is something I should go ahead with. So with all their support, I thought, okay, fine, let's go ahead with this book idea, even though I was not on board with it completely. So I told my dad about this and he said, well, this is a good idea, let's do it. But at the same time, poetry is something that isn't widely received by everybody. It's just such a narrow field and How was I supposed to get my work out there? People didn't really want to read it. So my dad said, fine, let's self-publish your book. And I thought, well, that's difficult, isn't it? Because when you self-publish something, you're like writing it, you're making your own cover page, it's a lot of work. And I didn't think I was ready for it back then. Especially because it was like the end of 10th grade, beginning of 11th grade. And I was just, I did not want to do something so drastic. And at the same time, I was so afraid. I was so afraid of what was going to happen if I did go ahead with this. I mean, would it even be liked by people? I was so filled with doubts that I couldn't see past what I really wanted. I was letting other people's opinions affect me and who I really was. And that was something I was not completely okay with. So I said, fine, let's do it. So when we finally signed with Partridge Publishing, I started writing, a few poems here and there. I didn't have like a working title or anything. It was just something I was, whatever I would feel like writing, I would write. But when I would write, I had this, thing, this voice at the back of my head saying that, this is not good. Why would somebody read this? And that doubt kept showing in my work. So like what I should have been writing, I was 10 steps behind as how good it would be if I did not let those doubts cloud my mind. So this took a long time. I rejected most of my poems every time I wrote them because it just didn't work. It wasn't me. So what I thought was, when I first started writing, it was basically just thoughts on a page, like a diary. Why don't I do that? Just forget about what other people think about me for once. Because writing is meant to be like an escape, much like reading. You want to go into this own world of yours and just stay there for a while, forget about the world completely. So I tried doing that, and then eventually, my work started progressing, becoming a little better. But at the same time, the timeline for my book was coming close, and my deadline was here, and I did not have anything to give yet. Out of 200, I had around like 100 poems, and I still had half my book to go. This is 1 week before I published my book, by the way. And I didn't even have a working title. So, because I would just write about whatever came to my mind, not about, what basically I wanted to write about. So, I thought, what would I even name the book? I don't have a name. So, I was talking to my sister about this, and she read my work, and she told me that, a lot of your poems are basically about love in different forms, like whether it's love for your sister, love for a guy, love for a dog, love for a duck, whatever it is. And she said, this is love in many different forms. And I thought, yeah, it is. So that's why I named it Love a Million Shades, because it is the different forms of love in different ways. So now I had a title, but I still had a long way to go. So how did I get this? Well, one of the main things about writing is that you don't get your own perspective, but you get those of others as well. So if somebody I know is going through something, something that's related to love or something like that, I could just talk to them and gain insight from them. So for example, if it was my friend, I would talk to her about what she's gone through and then try to write about that. So it's not just my perspective, but many different perspectives, which is how writing should actually be. So this is when I started becoming myself, who I really was again. I was helping people by listening to them, putting their words down on a page, and being able to counsel them in a way I never could have if I would have never put a pen to a page. So that's how it started. So I wrote my book, and luckily by the end of the week, I had it all done. There was one snag in this whole, event, is that I did not know that there would be no editing process involved in my book. So when I gave in my first draft, they considered it my final draft and put it for publication. That was really very tragic, okay, because the book was my baby, it was my fingerprint, it was who I was. And they put my first draft for publication after I put 2 years into that. So after all this fear of having, wanting to write this book and not being able to do it, they just were publishing something that wasn't even exactly who I was. It wasn't even edited. And I was very disappointed. And I didn't even want to put my own name on the book. I was going to go under a ghost author. Another one of my friends came up and she said, you can't go under a ghost author. I said, why not? I don't want people to reject me for who I am. I just don't want people to know about this. It should be a secret, let it be a secret. And she said, no. What if you change somebody's life? Or what if somebody wants to come up 10 years later and talk to you about this? How will they know who to talk to? And I said, well, no big deal. They could just send me an email on the email ID I gave them. And she said, yeah, but wouldn't you want to see the expressions on their face when they would talk about your book, about what you wrote? And I thought, yeah, I would. But I was still very afraid because, putting your own name on the book, is like basically putting herself on the book. And it is scary, trust me, it's very scary. And I did not want to do it. And she said, trust me, take it slow. We are there to help you. She supported me through this, and a lot of my other friends supported me through this as well. And by now, I had opened up a lot more than I was, in 8th grade, where I was a complete introvert and I didn't talk to anybody. Because when I wrote, it gave me this sort of confidence that I didn't have before. So that helped. So I finally put my own name on the book, and it went for publication. And it came back to me, I got the first copy, and I was super happy with it. Until I opened the book and realized that, well, they hadn't edited the book. So I read the first few poems, and I was noticing all these typos on the way, and I just broke down. Because I felt like I had put so much work into this, and it all backfired against me. And after that, I couldn't even write. For 4 months straight, I didn't touch a pen, paper, or my laptop. And I just couldn't write. I couldn't even read, because every time I tried to read something, I would think of what I could have done, and that I'd completely and utterly failed myself. And that feeling of failure, it was pushing me so hard, not only emotionally, but physically as well, that I did not know what to do with life anymore. And then one day, I just told myself that this has to stop, I cannot be in this continuous period of depression because of something that happened once. Maybe it won't happen next time. I have to stop this. So I wrote a poem about not being able to write. And I titled it Light That Never Comes. And one of the lines was, my hands are shaking and I can't even write. What am I even doing? So I wrote about not being able to write, to ease that load off me. And that's how I started writing again. The only issue was this time when I wrote, there was this other aspect of aggression that came into it. And my poem sounded really very angry. So even now when I write, that note of anger is still there. So my writing has changed a lot. But at least I can write again. So what I'm trying to say is that, people do fail in life. We all fail in life once or another. But it's that thing that you have to get back up and keep trying. Maybe 10 years from now, I can go back to who I really was. And, become a best-selling author again. But the thing is that I did it once, so I can do it again. I dreamed something and I achieved it. So why stop dreaming now? I can think about writing another book, or 2 more books, or 5 more books, and maybe one of them will be successful. Maybe one of them will be properly edited. So that's how you should actually be. You cannot let yourself fall, because if you let yourself fall, there's nobody who can bring you back up except for yourself. The first thing that you have to know is to believe in yourself. If you cannot believe in yourself, even your best friend or your parents won't be able to help you. Nobody will. So one of the main things you have to know is, if you trust yourself, if you know who you are, if you know what you want to be, you know what to dream, you can achieve it. I achieved it, and I know everyone can. And I know that maybe a few years from now, I can achieve even higher than I have now if I start dreaming now. Thank you, guys.